Now, how many countries in Africa have you visited? Out of 54 countries, I have been to 5. Yes, I know that's not good enough, but one Ugandan couple, Echwalu and Maureen Agena from Uganda, are on a mission to inspire more Africans to discover their continent. They traveled through 13 countries in Africa on a 5-month road trip. Now, while it was fun, it wasn't always an easy journey. So they are calling for policy changes to make it easier for African tourists to travel within Africa.
Just one of the highlights from the trip of a lifetime: sandboarding in the Namibian desert.
Epic. You know me, adrenaline.
Ugandan couple Maureen Agena and Echwalu spent 5 months on a road trip through Africa, covering 13 countries and 22,000 kilometers. Black African tourists, they found, were a rarity on the continent and often faced stricter visa regulations than Western travelers. Beyond the challenges, the couple wanted to reflect the joys of discovering Africa. From trying local dishes at roadside restaurants, including Southern African delicacy mopani worms, to exploring landmarks like the Great Zimbabwe Ruins and Lesotho's Maletsunyane Falls.
Right there is one of the longest waterfalls in the world.
When Cyclone Freddy hit as the couple drove into Malawi, they decided to help out with relief efforts. And throughout the trip, they shared updates online, realizing there was huge interest in what they were doing.
We're in the desert. Hurry.
Empowering other Africans to experience travel became key to the journey.
South Africa has been amazing. Never had I imagined that I would explore this country this much and learn so much. It was just learning and just having fun.
The couple saved for years to fund the trip. They want to show that Africans can travel the continent, and next time they're touring, they hope to see more African tourists on the road.
Lovely couple. I had a chat with Maureen and Edward and asked why they'd set out on this African road trip.
First of all, it was to understand and appreciate our continent, and then to try and document, because ultimately we want to get a book out of this. The trip itself garnered a lot of interest because we shared it on social media, and we realized that there are so many Africans on the continent who actually don't know the basics of traveling across the continent. So for us, it was a way of breaking off work a bit, but also exploring our continent, appreciating the diversity and the similarities, and ultimately documenting these experiences for other Africans to travel.
And let's talk about some of the main challenges you encountered, because it wasn't all fun, was it?
Not at all. I think we encountered quite a number of challenges, especially crossing borders. A couple of borders, we had a couple of issues, but they didn't derail the trip. Absolutely, that was definitely one of the main challenges we had. Part of them was also racism in some parts of the continent, but we did expect that as well, and we're quite prepared for that encounter as well. Yeah, but majorly, it was border crossings.
Border crossing. I mean, your racism aspect is quite interesting for me to hear, but also one of the main challenges that people talk about when Africans are traveling within their own continent is that getting a visa is challenging. Crossing borders is challenging. What was the main challenge of it?
I think the main challenge was the cost of the visa. As Edward has mentioned, mobility across the continent is a very big issue. So we needed visas for 3 countries. That was South Africa, Mozambique, and Namibia. And just between the 2 of us, we spent about almost $700 on just 3 visas.
Wow.
So you can imagine how much we would have saved for fuel or for other things to use that money for that we paid on visas. So if we could have a policy change around there to make mobility for Africans across the continent easier, it would encourage a lot of African tourism on the continent.
I mean, Edward, you've mentioned before that some of the challenges you found some sort of solutions to them. What were some of them?
I think a lot of them was to just find a way of relating with people. We found that at border points, if you pass through the major border crossings, you'll have a lot of challenges. One of them, corruption, a lot of agents in those border crossings. And so we derived a very creative idea of trying to look for the least used border points. They are often not on the map, but we managed to find a couple of very low-key border points where I would cross from. And from that point, we absolutely had one of the smoothest drives, and we wish we were known that earlier on. So if you're few at a time, you only find they give you a lot of time in terms of generally welcoming to the country, and there's room for small talk. And oftentimes that builds connection between you and then the immigration official. And we found it to be a very smooth way of crossing all these border points at the other countries.
We've talked about some of the major challenges, but let's talk about also what surprised you the most.
I think for me, the food. The food was one of the most surprising. In Zambia, we ate worms and mapome worms. Yeah. And for us, that's unthinkable. In Uganda, everybody we told about it was like, no, it can't be possible. And we also had a bit of crocodile meat, I think, which was quite surprising. But also, obviously, in terms of infrastructure, the road network in Southern Africa was quite superb. In countries like Namibia, South Africa, Botswana, and even Zambia, the road network was quite amazing. And it's something that us in East Africa should inspire. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Look, I have so many questions, but very little time to dig into it. So we'll leave it here. I'll get the rest of the info backstage. Maureen, Agena, and Edward Echwalu, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you very much for having us.